That great thinker Norman Cousins wrote about a medical paper that he had read of an incident that happened 75 or 80 years before. A paper that was prepared from UCLA Medical Center by Walter Cannon. A paper that told about a man given a death sentence with the words, "You will die 45 days from now, 2 hours after the new moon." And 45 days, 2 hours after the new moon, that man died. It wasn't one instance. There was story after story after story after story of people who were told they were going to die at a certain time, and they died. You may already know I'm talking about voodoo. I'm talking about witch doctors. And I'm talking about that thing that many people dismiss and say, "Oh, it can never happen," but it does happen. It did on many occasions. So, did the witch doctor kill that man? No. Each of those men killed themselves. They believed so strongly in the witch doctor that they believed that anything he said had to be absolute truth. And so the will to live became the will to die. Never discount the will. That certain something within our soul that is our steadfast guiding light, that determines who we are and who we will be. We should never, never give up the will. It's who we are. But sometimes things happen to the will. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's good because that strong will was what kept Michelangelo painting on the Sistine Chapel even though his body was worn out. It was that will that had Renoir paint masterpieces when his fingers were so frozen in arthritis that he had to tape the brush to his hand. It was that will that enabled Beethoven to write some of the most beautiful masterpieces of music, even though he could not hear them. The will. Something about the will, when we exercise that will, it's something that even goes beyond reason and understanding. It is the determining factor of who we are. I visited a parishioner in the hospital. And as I usually do when I'm about to leave, I prayed for her. I prayed for her healing. This is a lady that I had a very good relationship with. I think this is a lady that loved me. I started to pray, and her eyes burned in my soul. And she said, "Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!" I didn't know what I'd done. She said, "Don't you pray for my healing. You must pray that I die." I didn't. But within a few days, she was dead. The will is a tremendous power, and that's why we heard in the gospel that if you want to come to God, you have to come to God through God's beckoning of you. In some ways, you may say, that's very strange. I don't understand how we can come to God that way. Some of the verses even before that say, anyone that comes to me, I'll never turn away. So you have to understand it's not a rejection thing. It's just an understanding that to come to God, you have to come to God in a spiritual way and not an intellectual way. You have to really understand the nature of God and the will of God. Jesus said, I came to do the will of the Father. You see, it's that will. It's when we connect in with that will. Not when we give up our own will, but when we connect with the will of God. So much of what we do is horizontal. See, it has to be vertical. It has to connect with the will of the one who created everything and said, you are part of this creation. And if you're to be part of my will, then you're a part of taking care of everything I've created. And that includes the environment too. The will of God. So many times we've just understood the will of God to be something there to keep us from doing things that we shouldn't do and to punish us for doing things that we did. And that's a shame, because I don't think God ever does that. I don't think God ever punishes us for the sins that we commit. Sure, holds us responsible. But there's quite a difference. There's a wonderful little book, under 100 pages, called The Will of God by Leslie Weatherhead. And he tells a story in there about a time when he visited India, and it was during a cholera epidemic. And he was talking with this man who had lost the light of his life, his little boy, to cholera. And the man couldn't seem to shake the grief that was overwhelming him. And as much as Leslie Weatherhead tried and tried as they paced back and forth, nothing could console him. And the man kept saying over and over, "Oh, Padre, it is just the will of God. Padre, it's just the will of God." And Leslie Weatherhead knew he had to do something. He had to say something. And he felt he knew the man enough to try this. He said, "You know, your daughter, your only child now, is lying there on the veranda with a mosquito net over her. But if somebody comes in the night and takes a cholera-infested wad of cotton, a wad of cotton with the germs all over it, and takes that cholera-infested cotton and slams it down on her face, how would you feel about that?" The man said, "Oh my God, I would kill that man. I would take him as I would take a snake, and I would throw him from the veranda, and I would have no compulsion against doing that. How can you even say such a thing to me?" And he said, "I need to tell you this, that God would never do that either. That when you try to think of God as doing something for which a person would be sent to prison or to an insane asylum, it's not God. It's not God. Please understand the will of God is to be in perfect harmony with all His creation and to take this person who comes to Him and align him with the total will of God. And then you have a perfect union. You see, we're so determined to keep that will for ourselves that sometimes it just gets us into bad trouble because we just will not let go. Reminds me of a little boy that went to see an old man that was known to be very wise. A little bird behind his back said, "You're so wise, I want you to tell me, is this bird alive or dead?" Well, the man knew if he said it was dead, he'd simply produce it and say, "See, it's alive." But if he said it's alive, then he would crush it back here. And then he would produce it and say, "Oh, no, you were wrong. You see, it's dead." And the old man said, "It is as you will, my son." See? And so our will, our precious will. We should never give up our will. But if we want to be truly happy in this life, and if we want to be in tune with the God of the universe, then we align our will with His will. And then maybe we'll be, as Dante said, in His will is our peace.